Hello, my name is Radu Albu-Comanescu. Greetings from Romania. I'm a professor at the Babeș-Bolyai University, the Faculty of European Studies. I do recommend Visegrad Insight for the genuine insights they offer into the political affairs and economic life of the Central and Eastern European part of our continent.
Welcome to the Visegrad Insight podcast.
We bring you global experts on the future of democracy, security, and economy.
The leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Hosted by editors of Visegrad Insight.
Powered by Respublika Foundation from Warsaw, Poland.
It's Monday, 26th of January, and we are meeting together with Radu Albu-Comanescu, professor at Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca, Romania, and a fellow at Visegrad Insight to discuss the world after Davos, after the meeting of the World Economic Forum, which was not so much focused on economy, but actually on developments in geostrategy and defense. My name is Wojciech Przybylski. I'm editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight. I'm pleased to have you, Radu, after quite some time. And we've been, of course, following each other and texting on social media. But it's a real pleasure to have you back on the podcast with Visegrad Insight listeners. I'm sure no less appreciative of your views. So tell me your thoughts on what are your main takeaways after Davos for especially democratic and economic security of Central Eastern Europe, a Romanian perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation and good morning from Romania. Should I say Transylvania as well? I could start with a wow, a huge wow, because this is related to, my impression is that this is a sort of large conclusion to 1 year of constant changes that were brought by the White House to the international system, or at least to mechanisms that were fundamental previously to what we understood as being, the liberal democratic international system. It is an interesting change because, first of all, it repositions America. It demonstrates in certain ways that realists may be right quite often when saying that, after all, the entire system built after 1946 with the United Nations at the center was built for the United States in ways that handled and managed much of the interests of the United States. Others were inserted liberally into it and, of course, could benefit from such a growth until the United States had the feeling that they become the losers of this process. Hence, the entire change and the repositioning of the United States, which to us, after 2 generations, and that is quite exceptional in historical terms, seems so strange and so unfamiliar. But this is a wow, as I said, because not only Davos was extremely interesting, it was the first geopolitically consistent and focused Davos event, but it also redesigned the way America understands to relate with the others. With the others meaning that the recent episodes shaped completely the dimensions of the international systems if we take into account what is happening in Venezuela at this moment, the pressure which is put on Iran, and the way the peace for Gaza is being designed. And that comes with a famous board of peace, which we know it's quite an interesting creation.
But Radu, I must intervene here because we cannot forget also Greenland, and from the point of view of Europe overall, European allies and Central Europe, that gave a number of people goosebumps when they saw and heard what was going on. And then, and I think we also should refer to how this matter has been handled so far and where these things goes. But go ahead. I interrupted you when you mentioned the Board of Peace, and we actually focused. We focused on that quite a lot. There was a temptation by the Romanian president, I think, to join. Was it not? At least he has had to seriously consider joining the Board of Peace.
Absolutely. I mean, he had to take this into account, especially given what was happening in Greenland. And I can connect the two with, of course, Iran and Venezuela, because the Board of Peace is an expression of the new management of peace through business that the Trump administration pushes. Romania did not offer for the moment an official answer, but it is analyzing, to put it like that, which in very honest terms, it means sometimes just kicking the can down the road until we see what others do, and then we ponder if we can join in the same manner or we add something from us. But it comes with a lot of soul searching, because it looks like a denial of the authority of and legitimacy of the United Nations, but at the same time, given the circumstances and the future remaining 3 years from the Trump mandate, I think it can be seen as an instrument to at least work with the American administration. That is, for instance, why I believe that the membership was initially limited to 3 years with no pay, and then whatever may happen if the United States understand perpetuating these institutions with a new president or so. It may continue after the Trump mandate. Otherwise, not. So there is, for the moment, a sort of let's see which is the direction it takes. Maybe we become just observers. It's difficult. We want to keep a productive partnership with the United States. It is not easy to say no when you have American troops on territory, and much of our strategic defense is based on the partnership with the United States. Therefore, upsetting the White House doesn't look like a very intelligent strategy.
I wrote about the perspective of the Polish president, who showed up at the inaugural meeting, but he declined to formally participate in it, as he needed officially an agreement with the Polish parliament and a specific authorization of the Polish parliament and the government. So he didn't have that. He clearly is in communication this week as we speak with both the representatives of the political clubs. He's having a meeting later today. He's also having a meeting with the foreign minister. Obviously, this is going to be discussed. But one of really interesting features of this diplomacy, backdoor diplomacy that we are observing, is that the rumors, revelations coming from the presidential palace, well-informed journalists, who said that Nawrocki had a card to offer to Trump to say, we're going to join the Board of Peace, provided that the US will declare permanence of the US military bases in Poland, which is a key strategic objectives of, with bipartisan support. So that was the Polish chapter, but I wonder what could be the chapter, or what could be the chip Romania would hope for.
Well, to be honest, this is strongly related to Greenland as well, because Romania's position in Greenland was paradoxical, meaning that we took no sides. We took no sides, and yet we took both sides. Paradoxical, this is a double paradox for the very simple reason that Romania actually divided, and probably this is also the position with Poland, divided economic security is shared with the European Union mostly, while the strategic military security defense basically is shared with the United States. So this puts us in the middle. And it is quite difficult to actually, as we say in Romania, to see our parents fight, mom and dad fighting, and the kid having no idea whom to address and how to position itself. I'm not sure that this is the best comparison, given the fact that, when you choose the position of the kid, you slightly indicate you're not mature enough to deal with the realities around. But it resumes largely the fact that we are divided in our fidelities and our directions. So Romania, for instance, the case of Greenland, said that understands both the point of view of the United States and the point of view of the European Union, meaning that, of course, there are security concerns that need to be addressed. Those are the American security concerns, therefore, that we need to be addressing, of course, the European Union, part of what should be the European NATO pillar. And of course, state sovereignty is untouchable. So this is how we positioned, between the two sides, which for the moment, together with the fact that we did not officially answer to the Board of Peace for the very same reasons, we are positioning ourselves somewhere in the middle. We are trying to find the middle path. It actually raises quite a few questions, because it is a sword with two faces, as usual, for a simple reason. Everybody will understand moderation and prudence in foreign policy, especially given our geopolitical position. But they will also say, "But is Romania trustworthy enough if they don't take sides? Because if you don't take side, you may not express any value, meaning you do not seem to have well-defined concepts in your foreign policy. Is therefore Romania reliable enough, or is it always an in-between? Trying to get the maximum from both sides and therefore distrustful." And I'm afraid that this type of approach, which is historically ours, given yet again our geopolitical position at the intersection of so many tensioned areas during history, is what should be by now abandoned, changed, reconstructed completely, because we are in the Western club. We can allow ourselves to express, of course, a stronger position, but also explain, not just by a sort of passive retreat and waiting for the others to decide, but explain why exactly did we do what we did, meaning stay a bit in retreat. And that is what is missing for the moment.
I'll explain again the Polish position here, which can be read. You can read it in a very similar way to the Romanian Balancing Act. Apparently, there are rumors. We also write about it in the most recent weekly outlook published today, on the day of the recording, that there was an attempt. There was an idea floated by Donald Tusk that we actually could send some troops for reconnaissance to Greenland, very much in line with the official declaration from a couple of days earlier, when Donald Tusk has been signing a declaration against the attempted takeover of Greenland by Donald Trump. And he was aligned with European partners. So the natural step would be to show more assertiveness. The rumor is that within the government, the Minister of Defense was not happy with the idea, didn't want to declare that we will be sending any troops. He comes from the Peasant Party, the center-right, but more tilted to the right side of the political spectrum party, where he holds the helm over the decisions about troops deployment and logistics and so on and so forth. In that situation, also, that President Nawrocki wouldn't like to have it. The government backtracked on this idea and didn't send troops. It's a similar situation to the Polish position that we're not sending troops to Ukraine. I mean, nobody's sending troops to Ukraine, at least officially. But nobody in Poland also declared that we would be ready to dispatch a stabilization force in the case of ceasefire. There is nowhere to be seen on the horizon, especially that Russia continues its operation to take over and capture all of Ukraine and not to achieve any balance. So Poland, in a way, says, okay, there is no ceasefire, we're not sending troops to that, but we're also not signaling that we're ready to dispatch it. And the argument of the government is that we're building up force, and we need this force in order to protect from the predatorous policy of Moscow that endangers us both from the north, Kaliningrad region, and from the east, directly from Belarus, as Belarus has served as a proxy to Russian operations against Ukraine. And we have seen some drones, and we have continuous military security situation because of the state-sponsored smuggling of people across the border and breaches to the border integrity. So this is the Polish position in this context, and that speaks of Greenland. But back to the Board of Peace, I wanted to say that in both cases, in the case of Greenland and the case of Board of Peace, one thing that none of our countries really has turned their heads around, and that to some extent speaks of Europe as well, is what's our policy on China. Because over the weekend, right after Davos, there was also a follow-up document published, National Defense Strategy of the US, published by the Department of War, previously Department of Defense. And it only once more reasserts the policy ambitions. You spoke of the world order that is now being not even designed, but advocated for, and the US is inclined to stand on certain policy priorities that would enable a balance of power with China, a stabilization on the world stage against a potentially revisionist power of Beijing that massively builds up military might and technological advantages, as well as industrial capacity. US says all we need, both in Europe and especially in the US, is to reinvigorate the military industrial base, to invest in technology, to be able to match up and deter any potential not only aggression but unwanted influence over US or European allies of China. And in that light, the US is prioritizing Greenland in a way, in a very Trumpian way, which obviously demands all the reactions that we have been observing, and we're clearly, I think, with European position on standing up to sovereignty, but ultimately also Europeans are agreeing that US presence in Greenland to secure those geostrategic positions against China are really important for European security as well. This is the rise of the high north problem and dilemma that Europe still needs to develop. And in the Board of Peace, if I look at the composition, and I wonder if you agree with me, this is primarily the composition of countries that are not really super democratic, many of them. Actually, most of them, they are not. But the interesting part of that is that they come from the middle corridor, so to say, but the Euro-Asian middle corridor, which is the area in which US has effectively been contesting Russian and Chinese dominance in a peaceful way, again, under the brand and the banner of peace. And that, to me, is super interesting. It's interesting because it's contrary to the obvious and righteous moral upbeat of, how Trump is really not my hero. At the same time, the US strategy and the pursuit of these objectives demonstrate that there is something more at play that we might benefit from if this rebalancing is actually possible, it's carried through, it remains in place. And it aligns with European Union ambitions also for the same area and the same corridor. Radu, your thoughts?
Exactly. This was exactly my thought when I started to see, appearing on the map, an imaginary map, because an official was never published, the countries that were invited. And you would actually see a sort of anti-China, anti-Russia, slightly designed map, that would keep both, at least Russia, in control as a partner of the United States against China. I understand that China was also invited. I'm not sure if that is true. There's lots of speculation, but that would happen probably only to control the interaction with China once the others are on board. The thing is, indeed, we in Europe, and we still have to learn to separate the character Donald Trump from his administration and directions taken by his administration. Actually, this reminds me of this endless problem we had in our relationship. When I say our, I mean, Europe as a whole with the United States. And the problem is that we never really define the way we want to work with the United States. For most of the time, it's basically a bilateral dominant partnerships between Europeans and the Americans in ways that are visible. Every time we work with the United States, we feel, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, that they are the big boys in the room and we need them as friends. The European Union as a whole has a less defined policy, to put even less, clearly more defined than the one with China, but less defined in terms of what do you want, what do we want as an entity from the United States. And this goes back to the 1970s. I have in mind the 1973 Kissinger Year of Europe, when they launched the Trilateral Commission. And the Trilateral Commission back then was launched precisely because the United States had the impression that Europe can go by itself. Plus Japan, that was the third part of the Trilateral Commission. But Europe, since back then, conveyed a certain image that, yes, if you go pursue this path with a single voice, with a single identity, so on, at least politically, not culturally, so we don't want to afraid the sovereigntists, you can get to the point where you are a real partner of the United States. It did not happen. It did not happen, of course, aside the many ways Europeans see their own destiny, also because the United States are ambivalent when it comes to Europe. They want a strong Europe, but up to only a point, meaning that up to the point that Europe still is part of the American worldwide interests and not a competitor or not turning against American interests, which sometimes is exactly what Emmanuel Macron would like to see America, and he stated it, that Europe should be also capable to fight America if one day that happens. So this is what keeps us in many ways confused.
Yes, I am now even more confused because the understanding from the documents from the national security strategy is, and I agree with you, that America's objective in Europe is to enable American economy, a business interest to be freely distributed and benefit from the exchange and trade with Europe. And that's on the side of not allowing the protectionism the European Union might develop, including tariffs, anti-coercion instruments, whatnot, the geo-economic instruments we've been only discussing last week. So, in a way, that geo-economic element of sovereignty is what US is definitely uneasy with, and especially the big tech platform that benefit enormously from the cut they get from the purchases of their services in Europe. On the other hand, the military, I don't agree with what this. I mean, with your analysis that there would be an ambition in Europe to even militarily confront US, and that is not based on the ground that we are unable to. Simply, we're not at this level to do so, let alone any nuclear potential. But also, this is neither the ambition within the transatlantic community in Europe, but even the nationalists wouldn't do that. It's also not in the interest, and it's not part of what I mentioned, the part of the strategy, the newly published defense strategy of the US. I mentioned in the weekly outlook one interesting fact there, that they emphasize the role of Germany on the continent, actually not France, but Germany. This is the only European country for the second time mentioned in the US strategic documents. In the national security strategy, there was a poke, there was criticism of Germany allowing especially BASF company to install gigantic factories in China after the beginning of the 2022 full-scale invasion of Russia and Ukraine, kind of exposing our geo-economic interests of the collective West, let alone Europe, to the Chinese influence and Chinese meddling. But in the defense strategy, Germany is considered alone capable of dwarfing Russian military-industrial potential, should that be actually in place. And in this point, I want to make an observation. This is really a very uneasy point for the, at least Polish nationalists who have been building up and cozying up to Donald Trump and to the MAGA Republicans on the card that Germany is equally bad as Russia, equally dangerous as Russia. Now, hello. This is the Trump's administration saying, well, look, a German military-industrial base is needed for the conventional protection and deterrence of Russia, to balance out Russia aggressive posture and ambitions against European allies and Ukraine, by the way, as well. And should Germany not take the lead, well, the US doesn't have anything else to offer, really, because it's withdrawing.
Absolutely. When I was mentioning about the military conflict, that was Emmanuel Macron's idea. I have to underline it. It was in 2019 when he was really upset with the way NATO was going, and we know his remarks. But this will probably add to the fact that the Americans chose to rely on the Germans. But it's obvious. The Germans dispose at this moment of the largest sums that can be fueling the rise of military industrial production in Europe. And we know they did that. They did increase their military production. And it is a way of actually assuring the necessary mass of the military equipment at the disposal of Europeans if something ever occurs. So in the end, it is because France cannot and France couldn't really finally mobilize enough resources to increase their military productions. Britain is not there, and Britain admits Britain is overstretched in many ways, given their investment in NATO and various missions. And the others, I'm afraid, are not enough. I mean, Sweden, Italy, those who still have some military production are simply not enough to fill the gap that we need. So it is Germany, at least temporarily, to put it like that, to appease a bit the spirits of the Polish nationalists. In the same way, we have to appease some of the spirits, the bitter spirits of Romanians, who look at the very special relationship between Viktor Orban and Donald Trump and say, goodness, why couldn't we actually have something of that kind, at least a channel of communication which is beneficial. But it is clear that it is a matter of reliability.
Yeah, it is a matter of reliability, but also a matter of size. And in a big game of today's world, the size matter. Germany is by no means alone a sizable power, but in connection to Central Europe, it's actually gaining strength. The economic interconnection and interdependence to the production, to the industry of Germany is Central Eastern Europe. And then in that sense, I think we have another chapter to discuss on what these global changes and strategies mean specifically for the region, because not necessarily many bad things are coming for Central Europe if the region and countries in the region play their part well in the given. I think we can stop and pause it here, assuming our listeners are quite informed and they have the power of foresight. But in any case, I think it will be great to discuss this topic at another episode.
Absolutely.
And that's all from this week's episode of the Visegrad Insight podcast, bringing you the leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be in touch next week.